Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings to you all throughout the world, throughout the universe. I'm Dustin Craun, the founder of the Center for Muslim Life, and we are very excited to be joined today by Navid Akhtar. Navid is the founder of Alchemiya. He's a long-term media producer who worked for the BBC and has made all kinds of really incredible content. He's been working on this platform for the last 5 years. We actually featured Alchemiya back in 2015 as one of the top 50 global Muslim startups. And it's really incredible to see the journey that they've been on. And this is what having a company is like. It's a journey, and it is an uphill battle and a struggle, especially when you're doing global Muslim content. So Navid, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, and it's great because we've been talking since March, April about getting on, and it's been delayed and delayed. So it's great. You're really good to be talking to you today at last.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful to have you. And so let's start there. Really talk about the journey that you all have been on as a company. You know, I use this term Ummah builders. That's really about building communities and community-oriented companies, and Alchemiya is that. And it's beautiful to see how far along you are now. You know, we know that with every company there comes a whole degree of struggles, but now, mashallah, you have 300 really incredible films on the platform. One of the things that I've thought about within my own journey as an entrepreneur is that sometimes our ideas are ahead of the market, and it seems like now is a perfect time for you all. And I'm really happy to see you in the place that you're at. So talk about your journey and you know what you all are doing now.
I think the journey has been one of actually testing ideas and then realizing what works, what doesn't work. So for me, I mean, obviously, I had sort of gone to work in television very, in my 20s. I'm now in my 50s, and so I had all these years of experience there. And the common thing was, by the time I started to really think seriously about content for Muslims, while I was at the BBC, there was a need. They wanted someone, and there wasn't anybody else. So I started to think very deeply about it. So it's sort of, I mean, every third person I'll meet is like, oh man, why don't Muslims have this? Why don't Muslims have this kind of content or this film? Or we need to do something about it. But the difference, I guess, like people like yourself and me, and you've interviewed Abdulaziz Salazar, Ovidio Salazar, and many. We think about it every day, and we think about it in a professional context because it's what we do. It's not just some wouldn't it be nice kind of project. It's a really serious business for us. And so what it got to was the first real struggle was always, how can we get commissioned? How can I, when I'm at the BBC, how can I say I'd like to get this made or I'd like to get that made? And I actually had quite a successful career. We did it's 20 years. The anniversary will be next year. We did 25 films in back to back for an Islam season, and that kind of made me feel very ambitious. Like, we could do more. This is really good. And we did the Hajj and all kinds of different things. And so it was, and then as soon as they went out, and they were very positive. They were really about the culture of Islam globally and in particular in the UK. But the timing was incredible. They went out in August of 2001, and then by September, it just got rolled back. And so after that period, even though I had these amazing kind of list of things we'd all wanted to make, and we want to make these films about Islamic architecture and gardens and cooking and food and all of that kind of stuff, and into that we roll in the theology. So it's sort of really entertaining content, but you're also learning about the faith. And but after September the 11th, that was it. It just was. There was only one conversation: why do Muslims hate us? What's gone wrong? Why is there terrorism, and why are Muslims doing it? And so it was sort of right person, right time, wrong subject, and we just got, I got embroiled into it. It was like, quick, you're the only Muslim here, you have to do stuff. There's only 2 or 3 of you here, and you have to kind of start dealing with this subject. We're not really interested in all the wonderful stuff you want to do. We're interested in actually what the problem is. And so I found myself just going, it got darker and darker for me. And I thought, geez, I need to get out of this. And the first stage of it was a production company. And that was just a disaster. You know, we kind of learned. We did actually have one success, which was called Muslim Cafe TV, and it was a very early net-based series. And we used to just gather people in what looked like a shisha Moroccan cafe, and we gathered Muslims and non-Muslims together to discuss quite a range of subjects, you know. And so we had things like, is Harry Potter halal, you know, and we did one on what's the problem with Muslim men, and that's like one of the highest rating subjects that everybody wants to watch. So we did well, but at that time we didn't understand the business. We didn't see what the business model was. Where was it going to go? Because we'd come out of this old world media where, you know, the idea that you would want your own channel was just stupid. How's that going to happen? You know, you need millions and millions and millions. But we managed to get this Muslim Cafe TV up. We built it. It had a URL. You used to go there, and people used to watch, you know, and it went 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people were watching it, but it had no business model. It wasn't making any money. So when that kind of was failing, I then began to realize that there is going to be potential for something very similar to what a conventional channel was doing, like the History Channel or Discovery Channel, or National Geographic, but online, you know, that we could put it online. And so that's when the journey started. And really, to be honest, that was almost 5 years before we even launched the thing. And the first 5 years were really wasted, I would say, talking to people in what was the growing Islamic economy. And they talk big numbers, you know, billions of Muslims, all this kind of stuff. The fact is, it's not going to transpire for many people. A lot of it is about just managing that money so that it keeps growing. Very little of that money is ending up in the hands of entrepreneurs in that community. Some of it is, but very small amounts, in my opinion. And a lot of it just won't. It sort of, people are guarding that money so that it grows, but there's no kind of thing about this idea of what do Muslims want in their lives. And we really, to me, that is a great motivator. It's not just the fact that I was interested and passionate in content or media, or whatever, but a great motivator for me is, what do Muslims want? In a way that when you look at some of the great online seminaries, or even the great seminaries we've got now, Zaytuna or whatever, they're solving a problem. The problem was scholarship in the West. We want high quality scholarship in the West. And suddenly you had the right people come together, they had done the right work, they had themselves been through the right motions, and they could create these institutions of excellence. And in that same way, you know, you want to eat a high quality, organic, halal meal, you want to pay a certain price for it. It's beginning to happen. And in that same way, yeah, there were Muslim channels, there were national channels, Turkish content, Pakistani content, Egyptian content. But what I want to be able to get the Muslim version of the BBC or the Muslim version of National Geographic. And to be honest, when I started, I wasn't really that interested in film. I wasn't that interested in drama. What I was more focused on was, I just want to watch great documentaries on our culture, on our history, on the ideas and civilization. And so we focused on that, you know. But that, you know, and then by 2015, when we got it off the ground, it was, you know, it was a good moment because it went up and customers came and we made a big splash and everybody got covered. And then really real life kicked in, and that's when all of the classic entrepreneurial mistakes happened very, very quickly for us. And I would say probably now, alhamdulillah, at least we kind of dealt with those very early on, but it spiraled the project into a kind of a sort of a no man's zone for a while until we resolved those things. And so really what you're seeing now when you look at it is been all achieved, I'd say, probably in the last 12 months, where it suddenly, all these green lights came on after a lot of tampering with the engine, fixing things, trying out the circuits, failing. And of course, like all great stories, the biggest test is your own personal commitment. And that is really, really, really tested, and the adherence to values. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's where we are. And now it's the best it's been since we launched. It's, you know, in the age of COVID, we're not keen on spikes, but our customers are spiking. We're seeing spikes every day. So that's kind of very, very encouraging. And now also, having done that, we feel that that's why we're doing these conversations. That's why we're reaching out, because we've done that groundwork, and now we need to build a community. We really need more and more people to kind of become involved in it. We're inviting people in to kind of come and become involved with us, talk to us. Let's see how can we all work together, because we've sort of done that foundation work, but it's still got a way to go yet.
Well, and I think the big difficulty of a platform like this, and for any film, is the audience development component, right? And I think the hard part for Muslims especially is this idea that even Muslims, a lot of Muslims in the world have this idea that we're one community. And of course we use this term ummah, this idea of the global Muslim community, but the reality is that we are a multi-civilizational, the most diverse, global, racially diverse group of people on the earth. The majority of Muslims, like 68% of the world's Muslims, live in Asia and Africa, right? And yet, what do we see? We see 90% of the content made about Muslims being Arab-oriented, right? And now we see this incredible movement of Turkish television, with TRT becoming the second largest public broadcaster in the world after the BBC. So you had this idea that you wanted to feature documentary because it's your interest, but how has the platform changed as you've really dived into the audience development and what your consumers are interested in?
Well, the first iteration of the platform was global. We went global immediately. And then now the current one is restricted. It's UK, US, Canada, Australia, and a bit of Europe, So we kind of realize actually that, what you're saying, that the audiences are very different. Their expectations are very different. Again, very early on, we identified what we call a global urban Muslim. So rather than kind of say we're catering for all Muslims, what we started to do was, which is, it's sort of nothing new, but market segmentation. We're looking to cater for a certain type of Muslim mindset. And that Muslim mindset is not the old, what's your fiqh, what's your, are you Sunni, are you Shia, what's your ethnic background, what's your language. We were not really focusing on those. What we're saying is actually the zeitgeist of globalization is English. Majority, this is the language that people want to talk about. This is a group of people who are comfortable with subtitles. They have no issue reading subtitles. These are consumers who are quite sophisticated. They're pretty open-minded. Their own personal taste for everything from food to film is quite global. So these are people who will have seen Parasite. They've watched Korean films. They understand what K-pop is. We're not patronizing these people. They kind of got a very broad taste. It's just that what's debatable is what are the numbers. We dub them global urban Muslims because really they are concentrated in these key international cities. And at the moment, we still just only have limited data around them. But a lot of it was from our own experiences of travel. If you go to KL, you see people who are completely got the same mindset. I've grown up in London, I live here in London. I've lived here all my life. But if I meet people like yourself in the States, I meet people in, everywhere from New York to the Bay Area to Istanbul to bits of Berlin or Munich. There's a big community there. Paris, Sydney. When you start going to these places, you realize there is a mindset, a new kind of global mindset of being Muslim, and people are very, very. The main thing is they're very. This word hyper diverse. So they have very comfortably. They live in 21st century society. They have no issues with it whatsoever. They have respect for their ethnic heritage that their grandparents may have had or their parents may have. And the last thing is that they see themselves part of globalized society, So we were targeting them, and it means at the moment the jury's out on those numbers. Where are those numbers? Is it? And because the danger with any business, and particularly a tech business, is if you become too narrow. You can't not just cater for that. And actually, so in terms of our content strategy, what happened was people just kept saying, look, we want to watch drama, we want to watch entertainment. Documentaries are great, but it's not, we want to be able to kick off and relax on a Saturday night. And one of the reasons why I wanted to stay away from film and drama is because the cost. I know the cost is phenomenal. It's very big, and even licensing it is very expensive. So we sort of have now found a way through that. We've added that to the plan, but it sort of kicks into more spiritual conversations around watching, about what, and we last week we had a seminar and someone talked about the modesty of our age is not clicking, and it's this idea that actually, why are you watching anyway, and what is the purpose of that watching? So yes, there is entertainment, we have a human need for it. We can't get a scholar to endorse this because they're serious people, and they're like, quite frankly, we encourage people to use their time as Muslims in a good way, and that means either in Ibadah or with their family. Do we really want to be saying to people, here's a stamp saying you can watch TV? They don't really want to get into those kind of conversations. And so for myself, again, I personally felt that there's enormous value in watching content, in particular documentary content, that it opens your eyes to what's going on in the world. Similarly with some of the projects that you've been involved in, I would never have known about what goes on along the borders of America, and what's that got to do with me? But it's this idea that actually you watch something which has relevancy, because there's so much to watch. There's just tons and tons and tons of it, right? So you've got to decide what's to watch, and what does it leave you with? What's the end result? Has it shifted the dial in your understanding of the world and people and your place in there? And of course, drama does that, film does that, but not if you can't find much of it, or if it's not available, or or it's very, very expensive. So, we sort of have curated all of it there. But I think deep down we do feel, I personally feel, the value in Alchemiya is that it's teaching you something. It is actually allowing you to grow as a human being, and to have empathy for people. A great example of that is we have a collection called Black, Muslim and Proud, which we were curating that even before the George Floyd incidents, and BLM. And it's something which, when people come there, people comment on the platform and say, "Oh, mashallah, you have content for Black Muslims," and it's like, no, actually, it's for you Pakistanis, so that you can, you need to learn about your Black brothers, because to be honest, the content we've got there, they pretty much know their own history. A lot of them are very aware of it, and they're not getting huge value out of it. But it's important to reflect who they are to those who don't understand what their struggles are. So we've put that there for them. And similarly, we've got a whole section on Pakistan, because many, many people live around, Muslim community is very dominated by Pakistanis in the diaspora. Right. And so actually it's important to try and understand their journeys as well. So I personally feel that there is an education element to what we're doing here.
Right. But I think the difficulty is that we've lived through 20 years now of endless politicking, whether it be in the UK or the US or even in Malaysia, that have told us we need to be American Muslims, we need to be British Muslims, we need to be Malaysian Muslims, right? That we need to have this national identity. And it's fine to have that identity, but it takes away the fact that we as a community, we have what I call this diaspora of hearts, that our hearts are connected through our faith. And that we want, but for us to take the next level, go to the next level as a community, we have to truly understand what that diversity is by learning about one another. And then especially in an age where we realistically, we're not going to be able to travel the way that we were traveling for probably the next 5 years, right? Until the middle of this decade, if we want to be real with it, right? And so most people are going to consume that content online. I think that, so it's how do we explain that also to the film world, right? I would say the closest example to the Muslim community is probably the Latino community in terms of the way that it consumes Latino Spanish-speaking content from throughout the Americas, and even some from Spain as well, right? It's generally speaking by languages. The French-speaking populations also, again, more well connected in terms of the consumption of, like, example, someone like Stromae, the musician. he's popular all over the French-speaking world. He's one of the biggest artists in the world in terms of views, and it's because of that diaspora that's consuming him. So similar to the global French-speaking diaspora, the Latino diaspora, we as Muslims have that diaspora. It's how do we prove it? And I think the places where we see it being proven are through Ertugrul, again, through TRT's content, through, you know, films like I just watched Memory, which I absolutely love and highly recommend to anyone who wants truly spiritual content, because the reality is, for the last, you know, what we have right now, what we identified, especially with the film festival, the Global Muslim Film Festival that we've been, you know, we ran in June, and now we're having this monthly series, is you essentially have the majority of content about Muslims still falling into this category of Islamophobic content, right? And then you have, especially from Hollywood and global producers, then you have now this, what I would call Western liberalism type of content that essentially is directed, produced, written by white people, and it might put a Muslim character in it that is the way that they want to see a Muslim. So essentially you have the other and the same. Then you have these shows emerging that have Muslim characters. So like Mr. Robot is a good example of that, where because the creator is of Muslim descent, he has some really nice Muslim characters in the show, but the show isn't about their Muslimness. They're just diverse populations who are part of the show. And then we have what we've identified as Muslim-made content that's values-driven, what I would call beautiful content, right? That it's content that really is about beauty. It's about learning values through the traditional understanding of storytelling as an ethically driven vehicle, right? And so now how do you make that content, right? That's the big question. How people may not know, but Netflix spends $1.5 billion a year on producing original content. So like you said, wanting to stay away from drama, wanting to stay away from film is for a reason, because of how expensive it is. So how do we get the community to understand what it's going to truly take to produce that level of content? If we truly want a Muslim Netflix, what will it take?
Well, I think it's things like what you're doing. You know, the Global Muslim Film Festival, definitely it's a start. It's attracting audiences to that. That's a start, but it involves education. I mean, one of the problems that we are facing is perhaps we need to break it down. We shouldn't perhaps be premature in thinking that we've got this vast global audience of 1/4 of the planet, because the problem is that there's still so much piracy. So you're talking about, you know, people are just, I mean, when you look at the Netflix figures in Asia, they're not that high, and people say it's because they're not that high because of they don't have relevant content. They don't really understand those cultures, so they're not really appealing to them. But when you dig deeper, what you find is other streamers are also not doing very well in those parts of the world. There's just still a lot of piracy. There's just a scant disregard for what content is, who's made it, what the business is. People don't care, you know. So actually, the first stage of it, I think, is really we work with our home territories, and we get people to kind of become aware there. So we've seen the recent outrage around cuties. Okay, I mean, you know, people up in arms, and I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to cancel that. I'm not a big fan of these kind of protests, because I've seen it. I've seen people say this 1,000 times before, and this is, and you know, where have you been if you think this is the first film that's offended you? I mean, this is a regular occurrence. There's all sorts of things that go on, and you know, I can just, only a few months before there was one before that. So the fact is that rather than get, and to me, I think this is also a common fault within people's thinking, that you think protest is going to make any difference. It's sort of, it's almost as if you're affronted that they're showing you in a light that you think, I'm not like that. Why are you showing us like that? And then yet you look at BLM, who you know, you've had such prominent protests and you know, civil rights movement since what, for 40 years, longer, 50, 60 years, and still they're not making progress. So what makes you think we as Muslims are going to get anywhere? You know, and the two great people that, you know, who both heroes who we know their work Edward Said and Orientalism, and then Jack Shaheen. And so these tropes have been around for a long time, and they will continue. And I think it's going to be it's only there's periods of when the country swings to liberalism, and then people have some sensitivity about it. But as we see the rise of the right again, it's just going to start increasing. So the next question becomes that you're spending your money to support organizations which are actually attacking you. And it's that level of stupidity that we don't have that we don't understand that. And we also, what equals success? People don't want to talk to me unless I say to them, I used to work for the BBC. That equals success. That equals a measure of success. I've been in there working for a non-Muslim mainstream organization, so therefore I'm worthy of some medals. The truth is, some of the most misconceptions about Islam have come from that organization as well. And it's a very difficult process. I mean, this is very well documented. People like myself, many others who were there. It's like being inside the belly of the beast and then trying to hold it to account. And it's a very difficult struggle. But why I moved across is because actually the tools have been made easy for us. The democratization of media has happened. You know, the fact that I'm even talking to you is being recorded. We don't know how many people are watching, but they can. All of this indicates that actually, rather than a destructive process, a negative process of feeling victimized and then protesting, you can flip that into a sense of feeling inspired and being creative. And from that creativity, you will gain support. The issue that remains is for us to bring people over, you know, find who are our customers. Why we started Alchemiya was because it's like marking land grab. It's like marking out a territory and saying there is nothing that represents that. We have channels that are being transmitted from Iran or from Saudi Arabia or from the Middle East, which have just got people giving religious instruction. We now have scholars with their own websites, and those have video content on it. But where is the one that really kind of culturally represents all of this kind of synthesis of all these ideas and stuff? So for us, that was an obvious for me. This is where it is. And then I have to decide how wide is that? Wide is that that audience? You know, how big is it? How wide is it? And when I look to the right, you know, I think this applies to anybody. I always see people who are much more religious than me. And when I look to the left, I see people who are far more liberal than me. So we've had to kind of find our own space within it. But one of the things is that it took a long time for us to disconnect really from what everyone else is doing, what Netflix is doing, what Amazon is doing. Quite frankly, I didn't start Alchemiya in protest to anything. I started it because I love so much about my culture. I love so much about my religion. And when I even wanted to watch it for myself or to show it to my children, I couldn't find it anywhere. Where is it? It's all sort of, you know, it's ambiguous. It's a few programs here and a few things there, and it's all scattered around. And so actually the first stage of it was to at least curate it. And we've got nowhere yet. We've only put like 300 up. There's 200 in the backlog waiting to go up. It's just because of the scale of the operation, and we're doing what we can to keep bringing them through. But there's just still so much more waiting that's already been made. But then we're starting to see the gaps. When it was the last Eid, a month leading up to that, or even before that, we started to curate a collection on Makkah, Medina, and the Hajj. And as somebody who's made probably 3 films on the Hajj and 2 radio programs, I'm quite lucky. I'm in a unique club. But my friend, you know, Abdul Latif Salazar, I think he's done it like 20 times. But then there was someone else who we both knew of, who he worked for, who had done it 40 times. You know, so it's kind of so just to collect all of those films on the Hajj and on how Mecca has been portrayed or whatever. And one of the best ones, it's on the platform now, is a guy from Java, you know, West Java, leaves. It's 1932, and he made this film going all the way to Makkah and Medina from West Java. And when we found it, it's a silent film. And I thought, well, that's going to be really difficult for viewers to engage with. So we actually found some original Arabian music from the 1930s on wax cylinders. And then we edited that. We took a liberty to edit that kind of music onto that film to give it a flavor and to make that happen. But the point is, now, what have we been working on? We've been working on the Molid. We've been working on, let's collect all the films on the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Wait. Check this out.
Yeah.
Two feature films and 2 documentaries. That is it. We've scoured the world. That is it. Right? I can find you 35 to 40 films on Hitler. I can find at least 50 films on Churchill. I can get you 6 films on Roosevelt. I can get you a film, probably, you name it. Who would you think are the most important people in the world? Oh, there's at least 15 films on Ramesses, on the Pharaoh. The Prophet of Islam, the person that we love, 2 feature films and 2 documentaries. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of the reason why I believe we have to go a step back and really train our community in what narrative and narrative production is, right? Because I just don't think that we have the full understanding of narrative is foundational to building belonging within our society today. Because our children, when they're 7, 8, 9 years old, they start asking for cell phones, right? They start asking for iPads. And what are they consuming on those platforms, right? That you could curate on each of these platforms the children's oriented content about magic, and it would be in the thousands of hours. And then compare that to the content for children about anything that's faith oriented, let alone Muslim oriented content, right? So that's why we took a step back, and we're starting this digital media academy with a goal of training 100 organizations, 1,000 people over the next couple of years to really go into what is storytelling at the grassroots level. Because if we don't understand that, and we don't have a community who's very media literate, then how are we going to be able to produce something that's larger, that creates meaning long-term for our communities, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's a very noble endeavor, because actually one would say, well, why doesn't it already exist? Well, it's the same issue that we're facing. Does content travel from the east to the west, or does it travel from the west to the east? So fundamentally, these cultural beam-offs, today it's Netflix, before that it was Warner Brothers, it's Discovery, it's National Geographic, it's the BBC, all of the big Hollywood studios. They more or less defined the art. They defined the art of storytelling in this medium. And so actually, when you go east, you do see content, but it's not on that same level. Far more content moves from west to the east and is consumed, but less of it comes west. And you can say it's colonialism or it's this or whatever, but how does this impact on what we're talking about? How does this impact on us? Well, first of all, it means in the Muslim world, very few films are made about Islam because everybody's Muslim. So what's the point? Why would you want to watch that? I mean, they already know what they're going to watch. So the things they're limited to the Ramadan season. In the Ramadan season, it's like, I've been fasting all day, I'm exhausted, my husband's gone to pray Tarawih. While my husband goes to pray Tarawih, I might get to watch a bit of TV. And so there are these 30-part series, or the people who don't pray Tarawih, they can watch this 30-part series. And there's enormous guilt that, okay, it's Ramadan, I shouldn't be watching TV. So that's when you get the religious themed dramas that come on. But outside of that, like we said, it's like we still got people saying there should be never been film made on the Prophet. And the reason, when you ask immediately, is it's forbidden. It's forbidden to show his face. And it's like, man, I worked on a series on the life of Alexander the Great, and there actually is no representation of Alexander. I think there's one mosaic somewhere in the world that they think that might be Alexander's face. But it's creativity that takes the ability. You don't need to see someone's face just to be told about what they did, who they were, how great they were. And so it becomes a really trite conversation. We're just talking apples and pears here, where people just sort of immediately sort of jump down and shut these things down because they think people like me, who, if I'm going to make it, I must be so so wrapped up in myself that I don't know that it's forbidden to show the Prophet's face. So it just becomes patronizing. But the truth is, this is part of what we've got to do, because we're now seeing, I mean, it's coming close to 10%, we estimate, of our customers are not Muslim. And when we ask them, why are you here? They're not here to learn about Quran and Hadith. They're here because they like something. They said, oh, we went on holiday to Turkey. We love that food. Or we heard about, there's architecture of Yemen. It's quite unique. So we wanted to watch that film that you've got. But once they've paid for their subscription and they're in, it's very quickly they can find other content that will hook them in. But all of it, just because it's not saying Islam says A, B, and C, and do this and do that and be good and fast and pray. What it does do, all the other content, is it civilizes us. It just shows us a civilized people, which, with our own civilization, with our own ideas, with our own heritage, with our own history, with our own systems, and 1,400 years of that, and an incredible contribution to global civilization and goodness. And that is what people need to hear, because all they've heard for 20 years, really, is that these guys are crazy, they're out of control, and, they're our enemy. And so actually, when people come here and see this side of it, it's common sense to me that this needed to be done. And who's going to do it? The best people are people like you and me, who actually live. They're my neighbours. They're your family. If you're a convert, you know very intimately what prejudices people have about Islam. And I live in the midst of, there's hardly any Muslims where I live. There's a community over there, but a lot of my neighbours are not Muslim, and so they watch it. They're interested, but it definitely can't be sold to them as like, come here, I'm gonna teach you, you're gonna learn. Well, who wants to do that? Nobody wants to learn. People want to be entertained. If you say it's entertaining or it's interesting or something like that, then you have at least got their attention.
So let's dive into the platform here. I'll add it to the screen. So talk about how you've curated this incredible platform, and talk about the types of films that you've been working on, gathering from around the world. Because I think one of the things people said about the Global Muslim Film Festival is, I've been asked a couple of times, well, how did you do that, right? Like, it seems like it would be very difficult. It's like, no, well, there's a ton of global Muslim film. You just have to know where to find it. So so walk us through the platform, and walk us through the content that you all have been gathering and producing.
So when we first started, I think we just were sort of classified. I mean, a lot of it is about curation. It's about how do you find content, search, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, the big platforms are now reporting, some of them report 40, 45 minutes of people looking for content and then giving up, because actually it's become the opposite. Sort of the large libraries are caused paralysis. So what we are is, because we're a specialist library, and there are others, there's ones on jazz television, or there's ones about people who just like dogs, there's just hundreds of stories about dogs. So in our case, actually, we know that a lot of this content, people who subscribe, they watch a lot of the library. They go right through the library and they watch all kinds of stuff. But when we first started, we were just doing, films, drama, and docs, and shorts and things like that. But as we've seen, what it is people are looking for curation, because I think it's overwhelming. There's just too much content. I mean, we estimate within about another 6 or 7 months we'll be hitting about 1,000. A library of 1,000, and possibly with another 1,000 coming through in the year after that. And in comparison, Netflix is somewhere around 22,000. So we're not in any way kind of aiming to get to 22,000. I think it can cause a paralysis. But as a specialist library in one particular subject, which is the Muslim world, I think there's no need. You don't need so much content in. You don't need to get to 22,000 titles. So one of the other things is we make sure that everything we show has got mainstream appeal. So if a non-Muslim comes to the platform, they're not going to. There's nothing here that they will think, I didn't understand that. What is that about? And so this was actually this was a very strong objective we've all had in the team. We really feel very passionate about it. As a result of it, we've made sure that the design, the graphics, the look, the branding, the feel of the platform. If a non-Muslim comes, they should feel welcome. They shouldn't feel alienated. They shouldn't instantly feel there's some kind of specialist language being spoken here, or that this is only for Muslims. I don't belong here. I shouldn't be on this website. This is aimed at Muslims only. So we do our best to try to kind of show people, look, this is the Muslim world, but anybody can learn from it. And I think there are many people who really want to learn it. So we started to think about themed collections, what would work, you know. And again, a lot of it was like, what's easily, readily available? What can we get easily? Where can we build those themes? And then, I mean, for example, here, art, creativity, and culture, we're just realizing it's still too broad. So now we've got a separate collection on crafts, traditional crafts from the Muslim world. That's something that so many non-Muslims love about Islam. You know, they buy our carpets. We've got silk icats that come in from Uzbekistan. You know, Moroccan Beni Urain rugs are the most collectible rugs in the world at the moment. You know, and they're made up in the Atlas Mountains. You know, an Iznik tile will sell in auction for about $40,000 to $50,000. It's highly prized. You know, so we sort of source these out. And actually, the disappointing thing is you realize so many young Muslims have no idea. They have no idea of how valuable our traditional crafts are. And so the next stage, we're now assembled a collection called Islamic Art School. So, that's sort of how we're going with arts and culture. And then there'll be one just on architecture. And similarly, you know, we said, okay, Muslims around the world, but we're beginning to see themes emerging. And I think it means that what you've got here is both a library in the classic sense, in that I have a library at home. It doesn't mean I read every book every day. What it means is sometimes I remember I need to learn about something, so I'll go there and I have a book. And sometimes I'm in the mood and I'll see something I've already read and I'll go back and see it there. And so I think we're trying to get away from that sense of the Netflix model, which is there's always something new and there's always something, you know, kind of current and trendy. We just don't have the funds to do that. So we're asking people, look, we'd like you to commit, support us for a longer period, for maybe a year to 2 years. We'll have built a large library, but this library is also a resource for you at different stages in your life. I mean, there might be a time when when the lockdown finishes and COVID finishes, you might think, okay, I'm off to Turkey. You can come here, you'll find 20, 30 films on Turkey. And that sort of informs you. It might even inspire you, you know. So we're asking people to kind of reconsider. In no way was this meant to be a replacement for what you already watch. It's just an addition. I mean, what we saw when we started was that we were going from an era of, we'd had traditional, the first generation of broadcasting was, you know, terrestrial television channels. In the UK, there was 4 or 5 of them, and that was it. The second stage was satellite and cable, where suddenly it went up to, the EPG went up to about 700. And the deal you got was you paid one price and you got 700. But the truth is, of that 700, you probably didn't watch more than 3 or 4. And all the research proves that people's capacity is about three separate channels or 4 separate channels. People can't really consume much more than that. And so when VOD came out, what we saw was, okay, there's going to be these big libraries like Amazon and Netflix and Hulu, but we're a specialist. And so somebody might have Netflix and they may even have, you know, 1 or 2 of these streamers. And then they probably, if they're really into sports, the NFL might have their own in the future, or they've got it already and they'll just have that one. And then they have a religious need, so they'll have Alchemiya, and then they might have a news channel. So that's like 5. And we based it on that actually we're just part of your viewing. We're not going to be the whole thing. And at different stages in people's lives, they're interested in different things. Different customers want, you know, so definitely I think the most viable customer is the one who is a new parent, because they're stuck at home. They've got to look after their kids. The kids need something to watch, and then in the evenings they need something to watch, you know. And then after that, you've got people who are 50 plus. They watch a lot because they're at a different stage of their life. And they're interested in heritage, they're interested in depth, you know, that kind of thing. I think the ones who watch the least are sort of, you know, 16 to 20. They're busy on social media. They watch a lot of YouTube. They're watching a lot of content, which is kind of what you call throwaway stuff, you know. It's just sort of just people chatting, YouTubers, all that kind of stuff. It's to me, it's like snacking. You know, it's not got that same thing. And for us, actually providing what we call as a viable alternative to television means quality. And so we source and we look at it. You know, sometimes we've accepted something which, to be honest, I kind of think this isn't as good as what I would like to see. But I started to call them placeholders. I think they're placeholders until that film can be remade again. You know, there might be an issue with it, and but it's important to have it in the collection.
We have a question from YouTube. Were any preconceptions challenged once you started gathering this content? Did anything surprise you in what you found or didn't find? From Usman Tufail.
Yeah, it's a good question, really. I think a lot. I think to me, I came from a very narrow field of television, which was factual documentary making, and so I kind of really was prejudiced in favor of that. And I thought, well, it's my channel. I'll you know, that's the kind of stuff I want to put on there. And actually, what you know, people were saying to me, look, there's short film out there. There's young filmmakers. There's stuff that's been made and never got picked up. You know, it's a fantastic production. It just never got the distribution. The cinema chain didn't think it was going to work. So as a result of that, yeah, I have had my preconceptions changed in terms of, and also kids content. We get asked all the time. I think you know, we did a seminar last week on Muslim parents' crisis. Really, I think children are being bombarded with quite sophisticated, entertaining content. And so when you say, don't watch that, oh, here's a Muslim one, it sort of tends to be a little bit kind of not, it's not there. The quality's just, they're not engaged with it. They don't find it engages them. So we have got a creative challenge to do that. But on another level, I think the thing that we have not really, we'd like to do a lot more of, we've barely scraped the surface, which probably you've done better at the Global Muslim Film Festival, is finding young filmmakers, finding people who are entering the competitions, and you know, all of those competition entries, all of those kind of people who are just starting their career. We're looking for more of them, and I think there's just a lot of people who are doing independent film and finding themselves, you know, they made the film and then it's issues around distribution or just getting it into a film festival. So we'd like to kind of do a bit more research there and find that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest issue for all filmmakers, is the issue of distribution, right? Is how do you, it's not, you can find money for a film, you can have the hustle to make the film. The biggest problem today is distribution. It's like building a YouTube channel. Everyone thinks they're going to become some YouTuber, right? It's a very long time. So much of it is clickbait. Unfortunately, we've even seen Muslims who started with some Muslim-oriented content. Some of their who've become big YouTubers, their biggest content is totally haram, or it has some joke about something sexual, or a thumbnail with a woman in a thong, or any, like, literally. I've looked at the data, I've looked at the channels, right? That the idea of growth is so focused on that. So I think Ava DuVernay, as a strategist, what she's done with Array in terms of really helping filmmakers find distribution. I had a conversation with Impact this week, Muslim Political Affairs Council, who now are creating a partnership with the Blacklist to help, where they're creating the Muslim list, where they'll have an annual list of unmade scripts by Muslim filmmakers. So, we see the industry growing. We see what you're doing is so important with distribution. But so having said that, let's get to the fun part. So let's talk about now, and we have a number of questions from Esther Morton on YouTube, but I'm going to get to those after this section. What are your favorite? What's your favorite content on the platform right now?
Well, I love. I mean, I put a lot of it together, so I love it all. I really like it all. I mean, I'm just, we made a really nice video promoting the channel about 2018, and it was called "It's What We Love." This is what we love. I love all this stuff. I love everything from the beautiful tiles to the carpets to the music to the food that's what I love. That's my Islam. You know, I love all of that. So, but if you want to be specific, I think I'm just excited about the stuff we've been showing about Pakistan, because I grew up, my parents were Pakistani. I kind of pretty much hated the place. I'd been there. I didn't understand the culture. It wasn't until I went to art school and I met some old hippies who said, look, you don't know Pakistan. And I was like, well, what I know about Pakistan is what my parents have told me. And I'm now their age. And I always talk to young Pakistani, what do you think about Pakistan? It's just, corruption, politics, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. This is just such an amazing country with such beautiful culture and amazing people, and a fantastic heritage. And they're like, well, we know nothing about that. And so we're beginning to bring those films forward. I mean, I'll give a classic example. And this film, we've had it since we first launched, and it's still there, is the film on, it's called Message from the East, and it's about Iqbal, Muhammad Iqbal, Allama Iqbal. And you're talking about, in the pantheon of Muslim thinkers, he's sort of in the last 100 years, he kind of ranks up there. He's up there in terms of the philosophy, the ideas, all of this kind of stuff. And if you talk to anybody who's Pakistani, their parents will say, oh, Iqbal, you must know Iqbal. And it's like, go find the books on Iqbal. They were translated in the 1930s. The English is just like tar. It's impossible to get what he's talking about, what it means, what is it, what's the relevance to my life, what's the point? And this is exactly what great filmmaking, documentary filmmaking in particular, I did biographical filmmaking, and I did things like Maria Callas, and it's like, dude, I come from like a working class immigrant family, but great television takes these ideas and says to you, this is why you should be listening. This is why you should understand this. And so when I watched the film on Iqbal, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was just like knocked out. And I always recommend it to people, because in this film, they've managed to capture what is he going on about? What is he trying to tell us? What is his thing? And you suddenly realize he's just like a visionary. He's just so prophetic in terms of what he thinks is coming in the future, and he's able to encapsulate that. And of course, it inspires the creation of the country. So for me, it's that. I mean, and again, we've barely got like 20 films up, but when we talk to people in Pakistan, we talk to filmmakers in Pakistan, we're just amazed at how much talent there is, how many great filmmakers there are. And the same thing happens in the Black Muslim community, in America. There's just so much talent. There's so many filmmakers. There's so many great ideas. What it is no one is giving them space. And so that has become really important. And I want to go back to something that you were talking about just before we kicked into this. I've been involved in television for coming close to 25, 30 odd years. And I've made films, I've won awards, I've done stuff that I'm really, really proud of. I've made things which have nothing to do with Islam, on samurai swords and opera, as I was telling you. And when it got to this, it got to a crucial point when I realized, if we're going to see this move forward, it's going to take someone who understands the narratives, who understands filmmaking, so he is a filmmaker, to be the head of the business. Because what we're getting, and this has happened commonly, which is one of the problems, what we're getting is we're getting the guys with the money becoming the entrepreneurs, hiring the filmmakers. And that never works. It's just never worked. It's never happened. And when people say to me, why don't we have this? Why don't we have a thriving Muslim filmmaking community when we have a quarter of the planet is Muslim? Why don't we have quality? Why don't we have this vision? Why don't we have this content? Why doesn't it exist? And this is hard to take. Sorry if I offend anybody. It's because in our community, the guy with the money is who we respect. That's the guy who leads everything. In Hollywood, in the non-Muslim world, people support talent. They put the talent first. They absolutely see that fashion designer's energy. They see that young footballer. They see, that budding filmmaker, and they get behind that and they make it about that. The people who've got the money, no one even knows who they are. You never even hear about them. They don't say anything. They understand, support the talent. They put the talent at the front. In the Muslim community, all we know is how rich people are. We know who's got the money. But those guys, when the platforms come out, they want their face on it. They want it to be about, it's got my name on it. I did this, And I think that's where it just doesn't work. And so for me, the whole motivation of this is to be able to support people, is to be able to support those filmmakers, to get them to amplify their work and help them produce more. So the most important thing was to build an economic system that isn't reliant on handouts all the time, isn't reliant on charity all the time, doesn't need these partnerships, but in itself is a legitimate quality product that people feel this is really worth paying. You know, we want to pay for this and we want to enjoy it. And that money has to go back to the filmmakers. I mean, at the moment, 50% of what we earn goes back to filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge film fan of Alchemiya, and part of it is the reason that it's the intersection of Muslim startups and global film, two things that I really love and that I support. And both of those, like you said, have an issue to do with how we support talent and innovation and the arts in our communities in a big way. And I think some of that is starting to come around, but it's slow. So inshallah, we can continue to take things to the next level. So let me talk about some of my favorite films on the platform. So I love The Willow Tree by Majid Majidi. I think that film is so beautiful because, especially at a deep that we don't have a lot of Muslim film that has meaning and that also isn't so explicit about what that meaning is, right? The film Majid Majidi is about The Willow Tree is about a blind professor of Sufi poetry and a Sufi poet who's blind his whole life, and then he gets his vision back, and what that means for him and the crisis that he faces once he gets his vision back. I love, of course, our friend, Ovidio Salazar's film on Imam Ghazali. I think it's a classic piece of documentary work. Recently, what I just watched on Alchemiya was the television show from Malaysia, Noor, which Malaysia has this way of making like really edgy Muslim content, but by the end of it, everybody is praying. And I know that actually the government funds some of that content for the sake of dawah to the Muslims in Malaysia. But Noor is a film about a sex worker who is a Muslim, who was raised as a sex worker and comes from generations of sex workers, who is sneaking away at night to pray Fajr and figuring out ways to not be engaged in haram and trying to know Allah. And of course the Imam falls for her. And so it's a really beautiful story. And I think it's a story that is, you could almost compare it to Rami, but something that's much more spiritually oriented and unique because it also gets into deep issues in Kuala Lumpur. People who haven't been to Kuala Lumpur may not know that there are a number of red light districts and that prostitution is a huge issue. And even there's another Malaysian drama I watched about a child it's on Netflix. I don't remember the name of it, but it's about a child whose parents are drug addicts and how she ends up guiding the entire family to Islam. Anyway, shout out to Malaysian television. I love the Black Muslim and Proud section, especially the film on Omar ibn Said, the first Muslim in the United States to write his autobiography in Arabic while he was enslaved. Super important. Road to Mecca, really beautiful documentary about Muhammad Asad. If people haven't seen that film, I highly recommend it. Baba Aziz, beautiful film, Sufi-oriented film. The Blessed Tree, about this tree that the Prophet ﷺ actually took shade under when he was a child in Jordan. Really beautiful story about how they found the tree. Captain Abu Raid, I believe another film from Jordan that's really beautiful. And then, of course, Circling the House of God with Martin Lings, just such a classic piece of film that shows Mecca in a really beautiful way. Any thoughts on those groupings of films?
Yeah, I mean, the last one you mentioned, Circling the House of God, it's incredible to see Dr. Lings. I think that film was shot about a year before he passed away. He was 92 at the time, and he's recalling his memories of doing the Hajj first time in 41. And the line I never forget is like, when he got to the Haram, it was the first year they'd put light bulbs in the Haram, and it was like, that's incredible, and so I'm kind of like pulled into it because of just the historical aspects of it, this recollection he has of his journey, which he had made 50 years before, and he had done another Hajj subsequently in the 70s. So he did it in the 40s and did it in the 70s, and he's sort of comparing the two. And he's just so, his memory is so sharp of that period and all the details, and he's just so incredibly English, which is when he arrives, he's taken aside from all the other pilgrims who were Egyptians, and the Saudi, these officials come and they ask him, they say to him, well, you're white, we have to check that you're really Muslim. And he's like, of course, and so they ask him questions, and they say, and he's quite offended because the questions are like, how many rak'ah should you pray for the Maghrib prayer? And it's like 3, and it's, and so at the end they say, we congratulate you on your Islam. So he sort of rather sarcastically says, and I congratulate you on yours. And it's so there's entertaining bits in there. But what's incredible is that he ends it talking about the fact that it's changed so much, that the home has changed, the Kaaba has changed, the area around the Kaaba has changed, but the thing that's unchanged is the barakah, And so it's just, so for me, again, many of the films that you've mentioned, they're on so many different layers. And I think actually some of these films I've watched the Ghazali film now, it's been 15 years, maybe longer since it came out, since it was made. I think 12, 13 years. And I've watched it 2 or 3 times in that period. And as you age and as you grow, you start to see different things that you didn't see before. And I think many of the films that you've mentioned there, they're multi-layered. You can just watch them and get one thing from them. But in terms of things like the Willow Tree and what they're doing in Iran, it's kind of, there's something there. It's the beginnings of metaphysical cinema, as it were. I mean, we talk about Terrence Malick and, sort of makers, and Baraka, the series on, that they did there. But I think it's just it's a new medium in terms of being only around for 100 odd years. And the idea that actually of it kind of being able to capture people and give them some spiritual experience, that is, to me, that's the highest thing. If we can achieve that, that's incredible. And some of these, when we look for these films, we're always looking for that what is the emotional impact it's going to have on people? And what's the spiritual impact? Is it possibly a spiritual? Because we've had so much focus on the head, and content's all about the head or the emotions, but there is the sense of the heart. How are you impacted on by the heart? But yeah, I mean, the Blessed Tree, amazing film. Just an incredible story, and a great cast of scholars telling us about this amazing tree that appears. And when I talked to you earlier about they're just not, to me, I could feel the channel with the Sirah. We would have 1,000 films on different aspects of the Sirah, and I'm not, and people need to. This is the thing that we keep trying to explain to people. We're not talking about some learned scholars, as much as that is needed. Okay, that's not what we're here for. We're not doing that because that's there, that's available. You can learn great stuff from that, but we're not talking about someone just standing, looking at the camera and saying and reading, the Sirah in a straightforward way. We're talking about the kind of films that you would watch perhaps on the Discovery Channel, on the National Geographic Channel, on the BBC, where it's actually made in a way that many people can engage with it. So, and many years I tried to get the BBC to make a 6-part series on the life of, the last messenger, the life of Muhammad in the style of the BBC. And so for that, I did all the research, and I'm hoping, that we can still do this. Perhaps we can raise the funds, we can make them happen. First of all, they're not cheap to make. Secondly, things like, I went to Sandhurst Military Academy. Sandhurst and West Point, these are the 2 premier institutions in the West of military strategy. And there was a guy at Sandhurst who said, he invited me to come and see him, and he was like, yes, we study Muhammad's raid and his battles with the Quraysh as a standard part of military soldiering. And, trench warfare, Muhammad and his band of men against the massed ranked armies of the Quraysh, and there they are, these soldiers learning about the tactics, the military tactics of the Prophet. And then there's other people and these are all non-Muslims, there's other people who talk about kind of gender reform, this idea of how shocking it was to say you must be responsible for your wives, and what an impact that created at the time. And so there's just so many different facets. Each one of these warrants a 30-minute film, and it takes us away from the kind of, which we all know as Muslims. Look, there's lots of that. There's lots of those qadiyat, fantastic narrations, the Sira literature. We have all of that, and we can find many places where we can go and learn. I mean, I love the guys at Celebrate Mercy. What they do, it's fantastic. But that really is a Muslim talking to a Muslim. It's sort of, you've got to have a certain amount of pre-knowledge. We do need to make that content which actually somebody who's non-Muslim sits there fascinated, watches it, and then what they're not getting is they're not getting spoon-fed. We love it, you should love it. What they're hearing is some objective viewpoint, which of course it should have both Muslim and non-Muslim experts, and it needs people who are, great historians of Harvard and Oxford University in there saying, yeah, this is without a doubt. I mean, when you look at Jefferson, I mean, he had a copy of the Quran, and in the Constitution they cite the Prophet Muhammad as a great inspiration for them. So all of these things it's us putting our best forward, as it were. And I'm shocked to say we haven't done it. Where is it?
Yeah, and so we have one more question on content from who's it from Sarah Mostavi, who asks, what is your favorite children programming on Alchemiya? For me, my kids love like adventure shows, and they love like Legends of Korra and Avatar, of course. So I would say the thing that they've enjoyed the most is Salahuddin. Pretty adventure oriented and a pretty exciting show. What about yourself, Navid?
That's a great one. I really like that. I was really delighted to find Animated Rumi. I thought that's a great way of getting kids to watch it. But the recent one we put up, I and Yusuf, I was just speaking to Sarah Swaf. I mean, really talk about aligned intentions. She's absolutely gets it. I mean, you would be amazed to see how much effort has gone into producing just 10 animations, which is season 1. They have an educational psychologist. They have a Quranic instructor. So they're literally taking, key teachings from the Quran and then making them palatable for, I think between the ages of 2 and 8, it's for that age group. And it's just the animation's high quality. You've got Barbara Offendum. He's doing the voiceovers for the father in there. But it's just a commitment to excellence on every level. And when I spoke to her, she said, look, everybody says we're under, we feel underrepresented. And so, but when we are going to do something, we must deliver the best quality. And I think for us, that resonates. And as I know it does with you, it's sort of, there's a lot of good intentions in our community. People rush in to do stuff, but actually when it's measured up against anything else, it lacks quality. And and it's just so wonderful to see people who have spent years and years learning their craft, years and years learning their profession, and then they say, okay, now I'm ready to do something. And so yeah, I mean, the animation, there's a lot of opportunity there, and that's a big area where I know we've got to do a lot more work. And
at the same time, it's so expensive again, right?
Yes.
There's a Muslim company that I know of spending 7 figures on an animated kids show right now, because that's what it's going to take to make it super high quality.
We've got some stuff coming from Iran, which is just really beautifully done. Some very classical. The Shahnameh, they've animated the Shahnameh, which is a great, Ferdowsi's great epic, Iranian epic. There's some stuff coming from Turkey, which is, again, it's Mullah Nasaruddin, Mullah de Piazza, which is, again, he's a sort of folkloric, which travels all across the Middle East, but really from Turkey. So it's and that's the thing. We also turn down a lot of people who come to us, and it's like some people's like, look, it's Muslim, but it's not Muslim. We've taken the Muslim thing out, so we want to appeal to anybody. And it's like, well, you have to be careful. If you water it down that much, then you can't. What's the point? It's sort of gone too far that way. And then there's other stuff, which is this is just too Muslim. I mean, it can be too Muslim because it's sort of the kids aren't going to engage with that. That's sort of gone by the other way. So it's sort of, and yeah, so it's getting that balance right, finding that balance. And you talked earlier about some of the stuff like Rami and all of these other shows, etc. I think for me, I mean, I don't like to comment on them because we just left that world. I personally feel that as somebody who worked inside those systems, until we galvanize an audience, galvanize numbers, really bring the big numbers together. As soon as you have that, then you have great bargaining power. Then everybody wants to listen to what you're suggesting. Then those partnerships open up. But to be honest, I just don't want to see. I don't want to see anything about Islam on Netflix ever. You know why? There are stories. They belong to us. They don't belong to them. They should not be on those platforms. We should not be letting them make them. We should be making them. We've seen this. We've seen this get messed up big time with the Black community. It's not right. This is our heritage. This is our passion, our voice, our narratives. We should be doing them. They can support us if they want, but it needs to be Muslim filmmakers. That's the end of it.
Yeah, and we saw that recently. There's a show like 911 Texas or something from, I think it's NBC in the US, where it has this hijabi character who's a firefighter. And one of the shows starts with her like hijab being blown off, and her hair is perfect, and she swings it around, and they're like, oh, she's so beautiful without that thing in her head, right? And then she prays, and she prays sideways like she's doing a yoga pose. And so it just shows, yeah, I mean, if they're not even going to bring a consultant and they're just trying to hit a diversity quota, then what does it matter, right? What meaning does it have? A couple more questions from online. We have Said Yaqeen. Sanams, would love to hear more about the process of submitting documentary work, and I'll add any work to Alchemiya.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the moment we're at that stage where really we're looking at completed projects. We're happy to advise if someone's in the process of making something. We can give them advice on actually what will work for our platform or what styles they should be looking at. But generally, if it's finished, we can look at it. info@alchemiya.com. That's the easiest one. If you mark for it, content submission, then it goes into a particular person who we assess it that way. In terms of actually us funding content, we're just starting that process. And to be honest, we don't have the funds. We've got already people who we've made commitments to, who will be funding to do that. But that's where we need to go. We know there are so many stories, so many subjects that need to be done, and we are here. We making a commitment to Muslim filmmakers. Those are the people we're here to support. So we often get non-Muslims coming, and we're like, quite sorry, that's not what we're about. We're here to support Muslim filmmaking, and we're here to support Muslim filmmakers. But if we find films which non-Muslims have made and we feel they're empathetic and we feel they're well done, then yes, of course, we include them into the platform. But we have a clear mission in terms of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that was another one of the questions: was can materials be made by non-Muslims? What are the criteria that defines materials as Muslims? I mean, there's a great example of that is the film Tuba, that follows the Magal of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in Senegal, and that's made by Allah Alam if the sister is Muslim. She made another film about Yuzo N'Dour, but then she just made the Academy Award-winning film about what is it called? The film about climbing in Yosemite.
Right.
I think it's called like Free or something like that. Anyways, so that'd be a film that I think would make sense on the platform. Whether
we're familiar with the film too, but I think it's just sometimes the rights are tied up with some other platform and we can't get it.
I think it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, can non-Muslims make films about Islam? Well, we're not here to fund them. We're not gonna be doing that for a while. We have in the past, one of the first things we did, actually 2 Jewish filmmakers made those. It was called I Heart Quran, and we were very pleased with the outcome. We don't look, we're not prejudicial people in that sense, but I think we're not naive. There is a political struggle here, and as part of that political struggle, we've gone from there being just a kind of an avalanche of films about Muslims as terrorists. It's been covered to death and it's been non-stop. That's harmed us. That's not entertainment. While people have been enjoying themselves on a Sunday night, worried watching, Carrie Mathis, whatever her name was, in Homeland, there's a direct correlation between that and people who've been attacked in the street. And so actually that's something that we cannot in any way support. We're here to kind of stop this kind of thing, And so now the next stage of it is, okay, you're not a terrorist, but you're an idiot. You're stupid. You're something to be laughed at. You're a buffoon. You're a comical thing. And then the other one is like, we've had now 2 or 3 of these, is like, you're being oppressed. You're oppressed. And as soon as someone can come and save you and help you take off your hijab and it can fly off in the wind or whatever, or you can discover how free you can be. So why would we be involved in any of this? Why would we care about any of this stuff? What we're looking for is really people to just humanize us, because that's what we are. That's what we're asking for, is just simply be allowed to talk about who we are. And in the end, I came to the conclusion that's not going to happen. They're not going to let you do that, so forget it. They should do it ourselves. We should be doing it ourselves.
And I'm glad you put it in the context of a political struggle too, right? I think it's important that we mention one of the most important, piece of radical political filmmaking in history is the Battle of Algiers, right? And as a piece of political content that's so important, that's looked at by filmmakers all over the world. Of course, Criterion owns the right to that, I think, but Criterion streaming is only available in the US and Canada. But anyway, it's important that we make films and that we talk about films like the Battle of Algiers. How do we make really intentional political content that centers the Muslim voice? I haven't seen enough of that. I love spirituality in film. We talked a lot about spirituality in film in the film festival. We tried to have a session with Sohail Dolatzai, who has a book about the Battle of Algiers, who writes about political filmmaking. That session didn't happen, unfortunately. Inshallah, next year. But I think it's important that we think about these things as a political struggle, a struggle of not just recognition, but a struggle of empowerment. Real quick, a couple more. Usman, who remembered the name of the film, Free Solo. That's the film that won Best Documentary last year by, I forget the name of the filmmaker, but and anyway, it's amazing to me that her first 2 films were about Senegal, and then she goes on to win an Academy Award for a film about a climber. Which, it shows, that you have that level of talent. And because she's making films about Sufism or Muslims in Senegal, that it doesn't get the attention, right? It shows unfortunately, the reality of the white gaze still within content creation. 2 more questions. For Muslims who want to get involved in film, TV, what are the best avenues, especially in regard to directing and writing film? From David Clarity. I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, I think you've got to get yourself in through the established routes, which is think about taking courses. There's no shortcuts to this stuff. You've got to become very. I mean, most people I know who are filmmakers are just, it's nothing else. They think about nothing else. They watch a lot. They read a lot about it. And this is the other thing in the Muslim. I was talking to Mustafa Davis about a month ago. He said he's just shocked. He teaches now a lot of young Muslims filmmaking. They don't read. People don't read anymore. And it's like, that's a no-no. If you're not going to... I think there's a kind of a misunderstanding that actually filmmaking is about the ability to use a camera and to edit. And these are technical skills, which are important. But actually, most filmmakers are people who can shape thought. They can shape ideas. And so if you don't have skills in being able to kind of, go through a great novel and understand that and understand what the essence of that is, and to be able to bring that into a script, or what great storytelling is. I mean, people don't read Shakespeare, but actually that's what you need to do. You need to have understood he's the greatest storyteller in the West, and so you need to understand all of those things. And then there are the great epics of Islam, the Shahnamas and the great stories that you see right from India to Pakistan to Turkey. All of this stuff, you should be aware of it. But in terms of starting out, I think the first stage is get involved with, on a course somewhere, and that's where you'll make your first 5-minute, 3-minute film shorts, and then also look at short film festivals, what they're doing these days. There's people shooting. I mean, because really, to be honest, the camera work and the editing is getting simpler and simpler. It's sort of, you can make something great on a phone, but it's actually, is it something that's engaging? Are people going to watch? Are people going to watch it? And that's really what the skill is, to be able to do that. And then also just understand the distinction. I mean, there are many, many different things. So filmmaking, drama filmmaking is different than documentary filmmaking, and even what I would call television. I mean, it's perfectly. I mean, we're looking for people just to do some cooking shows. Make some, just show us. So I've got to tell you the story, right? We watch. Me and my wife watch This Is Us on Amazon, right? And great show, we love it. And there's one scene where they're eating bean pie. I'm like, and we're great foodies. Bean pie. Wow, that looks great. I wonder what bean pie is. Look up bean pie. Bean pie is a Muslim American dish. Ugh, who would know that? And so now we're looking for a film on bean pie. And, we want someone to make a good film for us who is Muslim and tells us about the history of bean pie while they make the film, And so there's many types of filmmaking. And I think you have to find where does your voice, where's your narrative, where does that come from?
Yeah, I would say just make film, right? Like start with your iPhone, start with your phone, and just try to make shorts and like really dive into it. There's so much rich content on the web. Like one of my favorite websites is No Film School, right? This idea that the biggest thing that film school will give you is film school gives you the network, and the network is so important to working in the industry. So I wouldn't hate on anybody that decided to go to film school. But if you want to make, short documentaries or documentary features, there's a way that you can definitely break into that yourself. I'm a filmmaker who's now made 10 short films with no filmmaking training, right? Who just, especially, and even like if you're a hustler, if you're an entrepreneur,
you're didactic, right? You're autodidact. I can see you probably just jump in, teach yourself so much stuff,
Yeah, exactly. And even I always considered myself a writer, that I started as a writer. But being a writer is about the ability to know how to write, basically being able to write a script. The difference of writing a script in a book or the difference of writing, you can write an article if you're a writer. The difference of writing an article in a book is learning how to write a book. The difference of writing an article in a film is learning how to write a film, right? You're learning the structures of the thing. And there's so many different ways. Like I said, being an executive producer, find your filmmaker friends who are trying to raise money. They'll surely take your help if you want to be involved in even the business side, because that's why a lot of there's filmmaking programs now that are like dual filmmaking MBA programs, because the reality of filmmaking is so heavy in the business side. You have to be involved in the business of filmmaking to get something out there. And shout out to myself. We have this filmmaking, or we have this digital media strategy course that we're giving right now. I put the link in the comments, and really we're going over a lot of that. If you want to be a filmmaker, part A, learning storytelling and really learning storytelling, learning the different types of storytelling, finding those resources. We have scholarships available still that we raise money on our Launch Good campaign. So if you need a scholarship, please email us. You can email me at dustin@globalmuslimlife.com. Happy to support. And then the final question is, I think that's it.
I mean,
that's it.
On that point, the other thing is, don't see it as a solo activity. I mean, if you're painting on a canvas, that's pretty much you and the canvas. Even actually some types of literature, it's just you've got to just write the story yourself. But good filmmaking is a collaborative process. You do need a team of people, and often what people do is they'll share resources, or they'll support each other in their productions, as it were. So I think building a community of filmmakers is also quite essential. Tapping into that, finding people who can help you, who can sort of make it easy. And that's quite important.
Yeah, 100%. I think that we should make that intention, right? As the the Global Muslim Film Festival in Alchemiya that's one of the main things I want to do, is build a network of global Muslim filmmakers, because that doesn't exist. And again, another place to start is look at the blacklist. The blacklist, for those who don't know, is where the top 1,000 unmade scripts are held every year, and something like 60% of the scripts on that platform have been made. It was started by a black filmmaker who saw underrepresentation of black filmmakers, and they've been killing it. And now they're building the Muslim list, and that will actually be our next session for the Global Muslim Film Festival monthly session, is with Impact on the blacklist, and now this Muslim list that's being created. So check that out, and maybe submit submit a script there, right? They're accepting television, they're accepting film scripts. So yeah, and so thank you, Navid, for your time. This has been really beautiful. You know, I know it's late. It's getting late in London. Allah bless you and your work and everything that you all been doing at Alchemiya. Inshallah, we continue to work together and continue to build together. Pray for us, everyone, and the links to our both Launch Good campaigns are in the comment section of this video. I think Alchemiya is I'll run those banners one more time. You can find Alchemiya's at launchgood.com/Alchemiya. You can find ours at launchgood.com/Digital Media Academy. So thank you, Navid. Any final thoughts?
No, I think really we're quite close to this becoming something that really goes big, you know. And when I say big, it means, of course, it's the money. It's the money. If we hit a certain number of subscribers and we're just getting ourselves closer and closer to that, it just allows us to pour that money back in to create more product, to just simply offer people a far better service than what they want. But a lot of it has been about self-belief. It's about believing that actually we don't need Netflix to do this for us. We don't need the BBC to do this for us. We actually have the ideas. We have the talent, you know, we have the stories. I mean, we have the best story in the world, really. So the story of the life of our prophet is an amazing narrative. And we come from a tradition that understands narrative. So it's just, to me, it's like we're so close. We've got to glue all this together and just work together. This is an unprecedented time of pushing people apart, of tearing people apart, you know, and people are kind of, you know, becoming more and more polarized. And so actually when you see that, you know, there's kind of divisions and anger and hostility, I think for myself, I always feel, you know what, the most radical thing is to actually come together with more people, is to bring more people together. I always go out my way to form these alliances. So we're delighted to be working with you. We really want to explore all of that. And, you know, and we need people much more than just simply filmmakers. We need people to review the content. We need people to tell other people why it's so great. We need people to write blogs about the films. You know, we've got a blank sheet of paper and we're starting a whole new industry, which is parallel to what's there. Because let's face it, we don't feel in that space we're going to make much progress. So we can empower ourselves and we can make this happen. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that reminded me of the final question that I saw, which was from Usman, who said, "You mentioned the lack of content about the Mawlid. What else is on your content wish list?" I think that's a good way to end as you put your intentions out there.
Yeah. My wish list is enormous. I mean, you know, you name it. It's like the Encyclopedia of Islam. But having gone from like the highest level of storytelling, I think something that I'm passionate about is I'd love to see a film on John Coltrane and Islam. I'd love to see a film on the jazz greats. Why did so many of these, you know, they're heroes of mine, you know, why did they all suddenly become Muslim? You know, what's that about? And as somebody sitting in England, that's fascinating, those kind of stories there. You know, it's really, I don't even know what's on my shopping list, because actually what I love is when people come and say, let me tell you about this thing, you know, and this happened, and it's like, wow, amazing story. And it's finding those incredible stories that have not been told. And we're seeing it happening now in the Black community. I mean, another one, you know, we talk about Black Panther, right? I mean, Mansa Musa, when, you know, a feature film on Mansa Musa, it's like a no-brainer, you know, the richest man ever. It makes Jeff Bezos look like small change. So that's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, definitely. Mine would be a film about Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. This film, this book, Ambiguous Adventure by Sheikh Ahmadou Kane, classic piece of African literature about the journey of a young boy who was the first person in his community to go not to Quran school, but to the French school, and what it did to him psychologically. I think that there's a documentary being made in Senegal about this book right now. Sheikh Ahmadou Kane's still alive, but there's so much content out there in the world. And and I even think a film series, like I said, I was really moved by Yunus Emry as a film that was just about the nafs and just about spiritual transformation. And to me, I found that to be fascinating. Why do we need so much, bells and whistles and explosions?
I've yet to see a film on Malcolm after Hajj.
Yeah, exactly. No, Malcolm, that's the big one, right?
He's a different Malcolm. It's not what people know.
And it's not even just Malcolm after Hajj. It's Malcolm internationally, the work that he did all over the world. Like, he was in London a week before he was assassinated, right? That whole trip that he took. Like, I sat with Malik Badri, and he told us the story of Malcolm when he literally went from Mecca to Lebanon, and the American University of Lebanon they canceled Malcolm's speech. And so the Sudanese Student Association organized for his speech to be at the Sudanese Cultural Center. And Malik Badri is the one that organized that. And he told us the story saying they didn't know how many people would come or if anybody would come to the speech. Then they walk up and the entire street is just lined with people. An endless path of people in Lebanon to see Malcolm speak. And that was one of the last speeches he gave in his life. And there's not a recording of it, but from what we know, it was a speech about OPEC. It was a speech about colonialism and what OPEC would create in really, organizing this oil wealth in these Gulf countries. And he had just seen that, right? So, mashallah, these are stories that have to be told, and they're not anywhere.
There's another film that there's never been a documentary on, Biryani. Biryani.
Exactly. There's endless, right? We love that show, on Netflix about tacos. My wife and I, we watch that show endlessly. It's so beautiful.
I have this chart. I think there's like 27 different regions make biryani. So this is from Afghan to Hyderabadi.
Yeah, so a series. So it doesn't need to be a document. It's a series about biryani. Yeah. Come on,
that's a Ramadan favorite, right? You want to watch cooking shows in Ramadan.
Exactly. All right, thank you, brother. It's great to talk to you. We'll see you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.